On the holiest night of Ramadan, witnesses in Gaza claim they saw something impossible, a luminous figure with wounds where no wounds should exist. And this wasn't the first time. The 21st night of Ramadan, Laylat al-Qadr, the night of power, when Muslims believe heaven opens and decrees descend. Gaza sleeps between generators and prayer calls. Stone alleys hold their breath. Courtyards keep secrets stitched into darkness like quiet thread. Then people start pointing at rooftops. Then the witnesses start talking. A woman boiling water in her dark kitchen, water she's boiled twice because you can't trust anything here, looks up and sees him on the building across the street, not walking, not hovering, just there. She recognizes a face she's never seen before, feels warmth through glass like morning sun, knows somehow that he knows her without asking a single question. The quiet settles around him like gravity itself has shifted. A boy playing in rubble swears the stranger called his name when no one else could have known it. A nurse working the night shift tells her cousin that the coma patient in bed 7, been gone for 3 weeks, suddenly woke and reached toward empty air, as if a hand waited there. His eyes tracked something moving beside the curtain. When she looked, nothing. But here's what makes it impossible to dismiss. A soldier who refuses to be filmed says a man in white stood inside smoke from an explosion, facing the noise instead of running from it. He blinked. The man was gone. The smoke remained. The first videos surface within hours. Phone cameras shaking in hospital corridors. A bright figure at the end of a hallway, clearer than the rest of the frame but not blinding. Someone whispers in Arabic, "Do you see it?" Another voice trembling, "It's him." Then static crashes through the audio. The clip ends with 3 gray squares. Another video appears on a different platform. A Gaza rooftop at dawn, lines of laundry moving in breathless breeze, and between 2 white sheets, a figure like concentrated morning light. The uploader's account vanishes within 6 hours. Re-uploads get flagged and systematically removed. People argue in comments, some calling it fake, others swearing they know the location, until the video disappears as if the internet swallowed it and forgot. Every single recording cuts off at the exact moment someone tries to get closer. The witnesses kept repeating a detail they couldn't have coordinated, the timing. All on the 21st night of Ramadan, Laylat al-Qadr, the night Muslims believe the heavens open and holy decrees descend, a sacred threshold. The sort of threshold where, if anything were going to cross into sight, it would be then. But the strangest detail that breaks every rational explanation, they all whisper the same name, Jesus. This creates an immediate theological crisis. In Gaza, 99% of people are Muslim. They refer Isa as a prophet, a holy man taken up by God, never crucified. Christians call him the crucified and risen Son. The figure witnesses describe could not wear both identities at once, and yet that's exactly what they see. A luminous man with peace like a mantle and wounds like old light. The details don't coordinate, yet they match with surgical precision. In Khan Yunis, a man says the figure joined their prayer circle, stood among them during recitation, then vanished at the final words. In Rafah, a mother describes her 6-year-old child's account, a glowing face and hands with pale marks, like healed cuts that still shine. The child drew the wounds with careful crayon strokes, hands, feet, side. Witnesses who've never met, from different neighborhoods, use identical phrases. The stillness around him, the gravity that made air itself feel reverent, the way he looked at them as if he'd been waiting their entire lives for that moment. This is where the story fractures religious lines. Clerics divide sharply. Some warn of deception and false signs designed to mislead the faithful before the end times. Others stay quiet, which is strange. When religious leaders who never miss a chance to speak suddenly have nothing to say, people notice. Government statements urge calm and accuse foreign trolls of exploiting Palestinian pain for propaganda. Tech platforms tag posts as unverified content, then systematically wipe them from existence. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, the videos disappear faster than they spread. Yet the testimonies keep multiplying like mirrors reflecting the same form from different angles, each witness adding details that shouldn't fit, but do. But here's what skeptics can't explain. This wasn't the first time, not even close. In Lebanese archives that smell of old paper and frankincense, a priest's diary from 1973 mentions identical visions during the Civil War. A luminous man walking empty streets at dawn, soldiers laying down weapons without understanding why. The ink has faded to brown, the pages crackle when turned. The priest wrote in careful script that a scar shone at the figure's wrist, visible even from a distance. In Gaza's oldest monastery, monks centuries ago wrote by oil lamp on parchment that still exists. A man in white appeared on the night of fasting, when stars bowed low and heaven touched earth. That phrase keeps returning like a tide you can't push back. Night of fasting, stars bowed low. Both accounts match the same sacred timing. The 21st night. Laylat al-Qadr. If trauma and grief explain mass hallucination, why do the fragments align across centuries, countries, and languages? Why do unrelated witnesses separated by decades keep describing scars, wounds, marks on hands and side? How do closed minds in different eras access the same impossible details? The contradiction builds like pressure in a sealed room. Muslims don't believe in crucifixion wounds, yet Muslim witnesses keep describing exactly that. A monastery keeper in the Gaza talks carefully about a miniature icon wrapped in silk cloth. It shows a figure whose right hand blesses while the left points to a wound in his side. The paint contains pigments that fade to gold in low light, a technique lost for centuries. No one knows the artist's name or when it was created. The icon predates any modern sighting by generations, but here's where it gets impossible to dismiss. 500 years before any camera existed, a painting in a desert monastery in Egypt shows the same hand gesture, the same light emanating from wounds, the same expression of infinite patience. No telephone lines connected those monasteries, no postal service crossed that desert, no internet bridged that gulf of time. Yet the faces seem to rhyme across centuries, like two shores of the same river meeting at low tide. The face they painted long ago echoes the face witnesses describe now. Modern sightings follow patterns that shatter conventional explanation. One man, a shop owner who asked not to be named, climbs to his rooftop with a phone camera at 2 a.m. He says the air felt different up there, cooler, like dawn slipping under a door hours before sunrise. Across the street, on a second rooftop where only shadow usually lives, the figure stands, still as carved stone, bright as flame you can look at without pain. He raises the camera and the screen flashes pure white. Not from light hitting the lens, from light behind the screen, as if the phone itself became a window to something else. When his vision clears, the figure is gone. The footage shows only laundry moving in windless air. His cousin believes him because she felt the same cold warmth on her face that night, sitting 2 blocks away. And here's what breaks the mass hysteria theory completely. The aftermath doesn't match psychological profiles of group delusion. People who claim to see him don't seem proud or triumphant. They don't seek attention or start churches or demand donations. They grow quieter, like those who've walked out of fire without burning and now prefer shade. Their anger softens. They stop arguing over small things because they no longer feel small inside. A teacher at a Gaza elementary school notices their children's eyes are different when school resumes after Ramadan, more patient, less afraid. If the fruit changes this dramatically, what planted the seed? Stories spread of practical warnings that prove unnervingly accurate. He tells them to store food before winter storms that weather reports haven't predicted. When those storms hit exactly as described, they're able to share with neighbors who mocked them days earlier. Others say they were told to apologize to family members they hadn't spoken to in years. When they obey, weight slides off their chests that no counselor or medication could move. Here's the detail that makes skeptics pause. It feels less like religious spectacle and more like preparation. But preparation for what exactly? Practical, careful, specific preparation. He tells one family to be ready to walk 3 days before Israeli forces order their building evacuated. They're packed and gone when the notice comes. Another woman says he warned her to move her grandmother's medications to a different room the night before a shell hits their pharmacy. The pattern spreads beyond Gaza's borders, like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. In refugee camps in Jordan, Iranian house churches, Syrian underground networks, people describe identical dreams. A man who calls their names and stands at the foot of their bed. Some wake to the smell of fresh bread. Others say their hands tingle for hours as if they've touched live electricity. If imagination wrote this script, why does each line rhyme with 2,000-year-old text? Then comes the most dangerous development of all: conversions. A doctor working at Al-Shifa hospital tells his brother that his cousin disappeared for 2 days, returning with a silver cross hidden under his shirt. He won't say where he went, only that everything changed. A woman confesses to her neighbor that she was baptized at midnight in a kitchen, water poured from a plastic pitcher, words spoken in whispers because in Gaza, walls have ears and some conversations can get you killed. Another says her sister walked out of their usual prayer room and announced quietly, "I just met him, not in a vision, not in a dream." She pressed her palm flat against her chest as if steadying a new heart that beat too fast. When pressed for details, she only repeated, "He knew my name, my real name." Underground churches, already operating in dangerous shadows, grow more silent. They admit strangers one by one now, asking questions only someone truly seeking would know how to answer. A pastor who risks his life meeting in basements says he's never seen anything like it. He cannot keep pace with the requests. People showing up with questions that carry scars in every syllable. Who are you, Lord? What do I do now? Where do I go where he will still find me? The numbers grow without records, without documentation, without any safe way to count. Whole families vanish, not from the earth, but from public life, going inward like seeds burying themselves to wait for rain that might never come. Consider the practical mathematics of this choice. In Gaza, changing your faith doesn't mean switching churches on Sunday. It means stepping into a storm that could cost you everything. Jobs disappear when employers discover your conversion. Family relationships fracture along lines that may never heal. Friendships collapse overnight. There are no book deals, no speaking tours, no applause waiting on the other side. Only a whispered yes that might cost everything you've ever known. Yet the whispered yes keeps rising from kitchens, stairwells, and spaces between sleeping and waking. Word travels through networks that don't appear on any map. In Tehran, house churches, believers gather around phones to hear testimonies from Gaza. In Syrian refugee camps, families whisper about dreams that match stories from Palestine. In Istanbul, apartments where Iranians and Arabs and Kurds pray together in borrowed rooms, people compare notes about a voice that seems to know their birth names. The testimonies follow threads that cross borders, languages, and centuries with surgical precision. But here's what makes the skeptical position harder to defend. Many of these new converts insist they've never spoken to a Christian missionary, never been handed a tract, never seen a Jesus film. Some live in areas where Christian presence is virtually zero, yet they describe waking with scripture verses in their mouths, verses they claim they've never read, in translations they've never heard. A man who lost 2 sons in an airstrike says he woke up with words in Arabic he couldn't have known. "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." He cried because it sounded like his boys calling him from the next room. Later, someone showed him the verse in a smuggled Bible. It was word for word what he'd heard in the darkness. If trauma produces religious conversion, why does it produce such specific theological content? Why do the dreams contain accurate biblical references? Why do the visions include details from first-century Palestine that most Muslims would never encounter? How do people who've never read the New Testament suddenly start quoting it with precision? Push further into the timeline and the mathematical precision becomes impossible to ignore. The figure appears with clockwork consistency, always the 21st night of Ramadan, always with the same unhurried gaze, always leaving the same sense of preparation in his wake. Across continents, a woman in Jordan dreams of a gate with 3 hinges and draws it in careful detail. A man in London who's never met her draws an identical gate on the same night. Both report the same message delivered in voices they recognize but have never heard. The time is short. Do not be afraid. They wake with the taste of salt and heat behind their eyes that lasts for days. Some testimonies say he never speaks aloud at all. Instead, meaning appears in minds like bell notes vibrating through bone, understanding that arrives complete and undeniable. Others report clear Arabic words, occasionally Aramaic, a language most couldn't identify but somehow comprehend. Never long speeches, never political statements. The core message remains laser-focused. Do not fear. Follow. Forgive. Be ready. No party platforms. No nationalist slogans. No calls to violence or resistance. This voice gives courage to love enemies, an instruction no earthly propagandist has ever found tactically useful. Scripture describes specific signs before the final day. Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. That day won't ask permission, hold press conferences, or wait for global consensus. It will arrive like dawn, whether humanity is ready or not. But prophecy also sketches long shadows that stretch across years before that final sunrise. Rumors, dreams, strange alignments, hearts turning without understanding why. Joel prophesied the Spirit poured out on all flesh, young and old, sons and daughters, every tribe and tongue. Ezekiel saw dry bones rising to know the Lord. Isaiah spoke of the glory of the Lord revealed so all flesh would see it together. Healings emerge that don't fit prosperity gospel scripts. No stages, no microphones, no collection plates. A boy who stuttered since age 5 wakes speaking his own name clearly for the first time. A woman whose right hand was paralyzed from shrapnel feels it uncurl as she reaches to turn off a radio, realizing only hours later that it hasn't hurt all day. An old man with broken sleep, awake for months from nightmares and sirens, closes his eyes and dreams peacefully for the first time in a decade. He wakes sensing someone sat by his bed through the night, keeping watch while he rested. What if these aren't isolated miracles but markers on a calendar we can't yet read? These aren't banners waved for applause or miracles performed for cameras. They're like water finding cracks in rock and smoothing them slowly over time, changing everything without announcement. A baker in Gaza City claims he saw a hand write on his shop wall, not with chalk, not with smoke, but with letters like embers that didn't fall. The writing faded by morning, but he drew what he remembered. Aramaic characters he shouldn't have known, spelling words he understood without translation. A grandmother who has never left Gaza describes crossing a river in dreams, water clear as glass beneath her feet, while a voice promises, "I will carry you through the deep places." She wakes knowing she's never seen such clean water but remembering the voice with perfect clarity. If the pattern is this gentle and persistent, does that make it less real or more? Some who encounter the figure make a choice that reveals everything. They ask him to leave, not from fear, but from honesty. "I'm not ready," they whisper to the light. "I can't do this now." And here's what breaks every cult psychology profile. He doesn't force them, doesn't manipulate or threaten or promise hell for hesitation. He simply leaves peace behind like a gift they can't return. Later, days, weeks, sometimes months, they recognize his voice in scripture someone reads aloud, and they weep because they realize they heard the voice of God himself and said no. The next night, they wait in darkness, whispering, "If you come again, I will not run." That's not mass hysteria. That's consciousness waking up. You can argue with videos that might be doctored. You can question photos that could be staged. You can dismiss headlines written by people with agendas. It's much harder to argue with lives that grow softer toward suffering and braver toward truth. Harder to dismiss hands that open to give when they once closed to grip. Harder to explain forgiveness flowing where bitterness pooled like black water for years. In the end, that may be the only evidence that survives scrutiny. Transformed people doing quiet good because someone met them on a rooftop only they could see. If this pattern multiplies across Gaza, the city itself will begin to feel different, even if no camera ever captures him. Religious and political leaders try ending the speculation by pressing humanity's oldest fear. False messiahs, signs and wonders designed to deceive the very elect. They're absolutely right to warn. Scripture commands us to test spirits, measure claims against revealed truth, guard our hearts from deception. But warnings against false fire don't cancel true flame. They make the true flame more precious and more necessary to identify. And what if this is exactly what was written? What if the prophecies weren't given to satisfy our curiosity, but to prepare us for recognition when the moment comes? The testimonies trace lines that cross and multiply like a vast map drawn in invisible ink, only becoming visible when held up to the right light. Gaza's night of power, Lebanese war diaries, a monk's wrapped icon, dreams in Tehran, the scent of bread in Jordan, 3 hinged gates drawn by strangers, hands writing without chalk on walls, wounds that don't bleed but shine like old gold. You can scatter these artifacts like bones in the desert, or you can fit them together to see if a skeleton stands. If it does, you won't be able to unsee it. Once you can't unsee it, you'll have to decide what that means for how you live tomorrow. There comes a point where accumulated stories demand an answer. even if we're terrified to give one. Either countless people across borders, languages, and centuries are inventing identical details for reasons that make no psychological or historical sense, or something holy is drawing near with the kindness of a careful hand and the authority of someone who owns what he's claiming. If the first explanation is true, the world grows smaller and meaner, full of people so desperate they'll create elaborate fantasies that align across cultures and eras, sharing delusions with strangers they'll never meet. If the second explanation is true, the world grows brighter and more terrible at the same time, because holiness isn't a comfortable thing. It's light that finds every corner where we've hidden our real selves. It's a voice that pronounces your name the way it was meant to be pronounced before you learn to mispronounce it yourself. The simplest test is also the hardest. Whisper your own name to the darkness and ask if he knows it. If nothing answers, you've lost nothing but breath and a few seconds of time. If something answers, the ground you stand on will tilt, and you'll put your hand out to find it held by someone who knew you were falling before you did. It won't solve the war. It won't erase grief or bring back the dead or fix the systems that break hearts daily. But you'll see war and grief differently, as if from the far side of a river you used to drown in every night. You might find new tasks waiting in old places. Make bread for those who hunger. Forgive debts that can't be paid. Hide those who need hiding. Bring water to those who thirst. Remember names that others forget. There is a tenderness moving through these accounts like a stream planted in desert places. That may be the strangest detail of all. Not the light, not the scars, the gentleness. Power that doesn't need to crush to prove itself. Authority that makes you want to kneel because you realize you finally don't have to pretend to be stronger than you are. For many, that's when the tears come. When resistance becomes surrender, not to force, but to love that knows your worst thoughts and calls you anyway. You cannot manufacture that response. You can only receive it or refuse it. And refusal has a deadline none of us can see on any calendar. Scripture warns that power demonstrates itself through weakness, that authority reveals itself through service rather than dominance. If the figure in Gaza is who witnesses believe him to be, then every appearance is both an invitation and a warning. The time for decisions is shorter than we calculated. The uncertain watch. They strengthen their hands for the next right thing. They test spirits, yes, but they also keep their hearts unarmored enough to feel when holiness draws near. This isn't passivity, it's alertness. Soldiers sleep in shifts for a reason. Maybe it's time to learn how to keep watch again. Here's where this leaves us. In uncertainty, which is not the same as confusion. If thousands claim to see him in Gaza tonight, who will see him tomorrow? Maybe the next rooftop is in a city that considers itself safe from such things. Maybe the next hospital ward that glows at midnight belongs to a country that forgot how to pray. Maybe the next child called by name speaks a language we haven't heard on this channel before. When the wind changes, it doesn't need our permission or our maps. It finds us exactly where we stand. Two possibilities remain, and only two. If the figure in Gaza is fraud, time will expose it. False prophets collapse under the weight of their own contradictions. Lies require too much energy to maintain across years and borders. If the figure in Gaza is real, time will reveal him everywhere. Truth has a way of spreading like dawn, slowly, then suddenly, until the whole earth is full of the knowledge of his glory. There is no third option that respects both the witnesses and the skeptics. Let both speak, let both test, let both keep watch. And in the watching, pay attention to what your hands are doing. If the one these people describe walks your street tonight, you don't want him to find your door barred from the inside out of habits that made sense yesterday but might be catastrophic tomorrow. Leave the latch loose. Keep a light in the window. Listen for your name in languages you don't recognize yet. Because what's rising in the desert may not be what any of us expected, but it might be exactly what the world has been waiting for without knowing how to name it. The choice, as always, is yours. But the time for choosing may be shorter than we think.